Okay, welcome everybody to day one of the America's Cup Finals here in Auckland. I'm Cameron Dunn, this is Chris Steele. Wow, 1-1 at the end of the first day. I don't think we really, as sports fans and sailing fans, we could have asked for much better than that, to come in and go, yep, we've got a contest on our hands, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the talk among the town was clearly that the Kiwis were really fast and they were going to have it pretty easy out there, but we saw some interesting conditions, sort of that 8 to maybe up to 14 knots at times, sort of wind range, and maybe even a little bit more in some of those puffs. And we saw sort of two very evenly matched boats. We knew the start's going to be important, and the Italians were very aggressive in that first start, picking a time to try and jibe back in front of the Kiwis, lead back to the line very early, being the only way to really engage with their opponents, which they did pretty well for the most part, up until maybe the last 30 seconds. And then the Kiwis were able to kind of wriggle free and get that wide right start, which we predicted that they were going to try and go for, and from there we saw them able to comfortably live to windward. A little bit of a Hail Mary luff from Luna Rossa, and from there it was a bit of a soldier's course, one-way track. Kiwis did a really nice job of shutting it down, making sure they weren't giving any passing lanes to Luna Rossa, and they sailed away to what seemed like a not a huge one, but a relatively comfortable one. But that set us up for race two, and that was obviously very different.
Yeah, well, I think let's just go back to that first start in the first race, for instance, because I was intrigued by that. As you say, Luna Rossa were aggressive. They decided they needed to jump Team New Zealand on the lead back, did a nice job of it. Looked like they got Team New Zealand in a really tough position, with 40 seconds to go, 30 seconds to go, and that high slow-mo, just staying on the foils on the way back there. And I was like, ooh, but man, Team New Zealand did an absolutely fabulous job from that tough position to know exactly when they needed to pull the trigger, get the speed on, and then get a nice launch. And they started, 3 to 4 knots quicker than Luna Rossa, and that was the mistake. Luna Rossa really will be probably kicking themselves, and I'm sure in their debrief they'll go over that last 30 seconds and think, right, how could we have done that better? There's definitely a few options they could have done, because from that position they were in, if they had just got an even boat speed start on that tight to leeward spot, they probably would have been in control.
Yeah, I certainly think the way that both boats performed, it was they were almost in agreement on how they thought the narrative was going to unfold. It was Luna Rossa really trying to push the envelope and be aggressive, because it sort of seemed like everyone thought Team New Zealand was going to have a big boat speed advantage, and they did a nice job of being able to do that. They took the lead off them, which is really the only way you can engage when you're coming in from the starboard entry. And so they did a nice job there, and then obviously the aggressive luff after the start. I mean, all of that suggests that they feel like the other boat is going to be faster, and you're trying to make something happen. But what we saw around the racetrack was not a huge difference in boat speeds. I mean, certainly not enough to a point where you'd think that if both boats, started evenly, one might have it slightly easier than the other. But if one boat started behind, being Emirates Team New Zealand, I saw enough in that first race to think that if the Italians can start in front in race two, then they've got a package that's certainly competitive enough that if you sail well, you should be able to win a race.
Yeah, and it played out exactly like that, didn't it? They did start ahead, probably, to be honest, in that second race, they didn't do anything in particularly great in that start. They had nice timing and everything. Team New Zealand really just stuffed it up, I guess, in simple terms. They got their timing wrong, did a bad turn up and ended up late, as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, they chose not to engage, basically, so they got on the tail of Luna Rossa when both boats were on port. Obviously, Luna Rossa came in first from the port side, so they had the early entry, and they're able to pick their lead back time, and then from there you're in you've got two options. If you're the boat behind that's pushing, you can jibe on the same line and try and push, which is, I guess, somewhat difficult to do if you're trying to stay away, because it brings the two boats together, and the control is then in the boat in front to decide when they want to turn up and all that kind of stuff. So maybe they're a little bit afraid or aware that they didn't want to do that, and so they sheeted on and they went high up the boundary and then into attack. But from there, it's such a difficult position because you're so far advanced. It's such a big turn down to try and get on the tail of the other boat.
Really hard to push from that position.
Yeah, then it just comes down to the boat in front, or the lead boat's decision of when they sort of pick the time to head back to the line. And if they get their time on distance right, which they obviously did, then it's very difficult being the boat behind to sort of push and get a start, and that's obviously all they were trying to do, was get a start where they were somewhat even and able to split.
Yeah, you know, Burling said they wanted the right.
Wanted the right,
They wanted the right.
And maybe there was a little bit of a left shift because both boats ended up being quite late to the line. But I sort of just kind of felt like the narrative was that one boat was being the aggressor and one boat was very cautious and trying to be defensive. And from what I saw, I just thought that, you know, I think what
Team New Zealand will be kicking themselves for, though, was it's all right to be defensive and just try and get a good start, but they really didn't execute that at all well.
Yeah.
And hey, it's not the end of the world. And you listen to Pete after the race, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we made a mistake. We'll do it better next time," and I'm sure they will. But you know, they made a pretty big mistake there. They didn't really even give themselves a shot at that start.
Yeah, and like we sort of said, from then on, the boats, there didn't seem like enough of a performance difference. No. Certainly not upwind anyway. Yep. That the Kiwis were sort of able to get themselves back into the race. I thought the Italians did a very nice job of keeping it tight when they needed to, and then choosing their moments to try and stretch away and do one less manoeuvre or pick the wind shift and bounce your opponent the wrong way. I thought they did a nice job of that. So, I mean, the good news is for the Kiwi fans is you can come away from today, well, particularly that second race, thinking that, you know, you probably lost it through your own sort of doing, and if you can address those issues and figure out how to not do that again, then, you know, it'd be a different story. But the flip side to that is it's very, very encouraging for the Italians because, you know, a lot of people were sort of saying that they didn't have a competitive enough boat that if they had an even start, they were able to win a race. So
yeah, it's classic, eh? Day one of the America's Cup. In the end of the day, all the pre-chat and stuff going on about who's going to be faster and all that. At the end of the day, you talk to the sailors on the team. Nobody really knows until that first lineup.
Yeah, and
you know?
so I mean that brings us into the weekend. Obviously, these guys have a day off tomorrow. And I'm sure they'll be back to the drawing board and looking at today's racing and try and figure out what they can do better. But, you know, it's going to be a new set of conditions on Friday. And again, there's
possibly
that big
a bit lighter.
A big question mark over where the boats are going to stack up. I mean, there could be a performance gain one way or the other. The Italians have done a really nice job of improving their performance in the mid-range. Is that going to cost them in the lower range? We haven't seen Team New Zealand race with this configuration officially at all. So we don't know how the boat's going to stack up in those conditions, but from a sailing fan's perspective, what a great day. 1-1 sets us up for, you know, if the racing's that tight the whole way through, it's going to come down to who wins the start and then who makes the right decisions around the racetrack. Yeah,
if it doesn't matter if you're a Team New Zealand fan or a Luna Rossa fan, if you didn't like today's racing, you're not going to like any day's racing. I reckon it's going to be awesome contest coming up on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, see how we go.
Yeah, who knows? So, I mean, like you are, Cam, I'm very excited to see how it all unfolds on Friday, and I'm sure all the viewers around the world are as well. So, on behalf of everyone here at Live Sail Die, big thanks to all our supporters and sponsors, and we look forward to bringing you more action on Friday afternoon.
Cheers, everyone.
Come on!